As a high performer, you chase perfection. You seek to learn, you seek opportunities to hone and refine your skill sets. You see the quality of each evolution as a direct reflection of you and assessment of your competence. How's that working out for you? What toll is it taking on you? Is it benefiting you? Is it benefiting those around you? Today, we'll discuss the importance of seeing your desire to excel through the lens of what you have accomplished, not through the lens of what else could have been done.
How okay is okay enough? Powerful topic, and one that I would imagine, Jeff, more than a few folks out there experience, that sense of incompleteness or not enoughness.
This topic hit me hard because it came up 3 times with clients this week. This idea of, yeah, it was good. We did what we needed to, but it could have been better. Not enoughness prompted this question of how okay is okay enough? When are you going to be satisfied, content, or proud of what you have accomplished? With the one particular client I talked to about this, it really hit them like, I hadn't thought about it that way. And I was like, this is a podcast. This is going to be our topic this week. If it came up 3 times this week, this is the universe speaking. Maybe this is something we need to explore.
I am Susan Hendrich.
And I'm Jeff Servello.
And this is Imperfect, Better After Broken, the show where we celebrate the scars, the cracks, and the stories that make us stronger.
That's right. Here on Sandcastle Radio, America's hottest online variety music station.
Just thinking about the world right now, there's a lot going on outside. But for me, this topic goes deep on the inside, maybe even past our consciousness. Where do people learn that they're not enough? How does that phenomenon begin?
It's a great question. I was thinking along those lines and exploring this idea of self-talk. I think you see it all over the place. He went 3 for 4, but maybe he could have beat that ground ball out at first. It's always this yes, but.
Deficit mindset, which we know is evolutionarily effective, actually. Striving for more is part of what has kept this human condition going, because if we were to sit in complacency, then the lion would creep up from behind us in the jungle. But I think we might have taken it a little too far. So here's a quiz. On a scale from 1 to 10, where do most people answer the question, how satisfied are you with your life? This was a world happiness study. So this is people around the world. On a scale from 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with your life? What do you think people say?
I'm going to guess 6. And I think because people don't want to say 4, because then they'll think that they're being too negative. And I don't think people want to say 8 or 9 because who really deserves to say their life's an 8 or 9? That's kind of my perspective on it. I have never read this study.
Tag that word perspective. I want to come back to that. You are bang on. The average scores tend to sit somewhere around 4.5 to 5.5, depending on where you are in the US. It's a little bit more towards 6. With the sum total of all the efforts we're able to make in our lives, we get to an average around, say, 5 to 6. And of course, people are spread across that scale, but the vast majority cluster in that mid-range of pretty good, but not great. Are we okay with that?
That's a great question. It leads back to our title, How Okay is Okay Enough? And it makes me think of the first psychology study I read. I read it in college, and it was related to something that the author referred to as the Baywatch effect. The term perceived relative deprivation. This was in a political theory class I was taking at the United States Naval Academy, and it talked about how with satellite TV and cable, people who lived in these rural areas, they thought the pinnacle of life was a couple of mules, some farmland, and their grass hut. They thought that was like the apex. And then now Baywatch is being beamed into their home, and they're seeing a new definition of abundance. And as a result, I think they now are like, wait a minute, I thought this was the dream. That's the dream? When you bring up that Likert scale, it really makes me wonder is, what are we grading ourselves again?
Perceived relative deprivation. It's the relative term that gets me. Listen to this study and you'll think, I would never fall for that. Lo and behold, people were put in a room in a group setting, and everyone in the room got a paper clip. Everybody in the room except the subject were plants. So everybody got a paper clip except you. And they all somehow knew to put their paper clip on their lapel or their shirt. There were two things. A, everybody in the room has something I don't. And B, there's a ritual of some sort where they're supposed to put it on here. And people's anxiety, blood pressure, searching around the room and you can almost watch the eyes of these people on the film going, why didn't I get one? Am I being singled out? This is ridiculous. Should I ask something? The machinations we go through in our mind when we have perceived relative deprivation are astonishing. And imagine how much that gets in the way of connecting with others, feeling enough to connect with others, or getting anything done, Jeff.
Let me ask you this. To build off that, when you ask somebody how their day is going or how something went, and they say, okay, what generally is their tone of voice and body language when they say it?
It's like that Likert scale we created. Okay, you're not allowed to say okay above like a 6,
Yeah.
or when you said that, or below. You know, I'm not terrible, but I'm also letting you know I'm not chipper and everything's great. What do you think?
Yeah. You generally get okay, not okay. Like, how was your day? Okay, like that never happens. There's never this ho hum. Yeah, I'm just okay.
Mm-hmm. I have a vulnerable story to share, and I'm curious about your own upbringing. If this, how this self-perception landed for you. I was born, I'm told, with a happy disposition. I was a happy, I didn't cry a lot, and I was happy to see people in stores while I was in the little cart and things. And throughout my early childhood, that was a lovely thing because, you don't want your kid crying, I guess, of course, all the time. But as I got into adulthood and went into the workplace, there was a sense of, are you really that happy? And, I got feedback. So let's talk about relative deprivation. It was kind of the opposite. Why are you happy? It's raining, or why are you happy? The trip got canceled. And I believe part of it was my natural inclination, but I also believe that some of it is, what I learned to enjoy and my kind of social referencing from teachers, I guess, or school. But as an adult, I started to feel a little bit of shame or worry that there is something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And so I found myself tamping or metering out my joy or my perception of a situation and thinking, okay, the really smart people are finding a fault in this. And like on the DISC, if you've ever done the DISC personality inventory, which you and I do all the time, all the D's and C's in the room. In other words, the dominant and conscientious folks in the room, they're like laser pinpointing and finding the possible crack. They're the ones that are saving the day by identifying things. And then I was feeling like this, almost trivial person over on the side. So I bring this story to you because even positive or desirable to self traits can be perceived as relative deprivation if they don't match the norm around us, which is a very strong pull, that norm to belong.
The norm is almost to shade your light, to tamp it down, to not let your happiness shine through. Like if you're having a great day, it is socially unacceptable to walk up and be like, let me tell you about my great day. Like you're almost somehow rubbing it in.
Yes.
But yet we are very quick in accepting of people bitching and complaining.
Yeah. So then your opening statement about rating yourself, even if you're having a great day and it's a 7-ish, you see somebody walk in the room who says they're a 9, suddenly your 7 feels like a 4, and nothing's changed except for comparison. So let's get a definition of appreciating where you are. What does that mean to be content?
I think that this is the challenge. Exactly what I'm experiencing right now is a lack of definition of what content is and what good and acceptable are. I think we know what things are. Maybe we don't. Maybe it's just we have this weird feeling. throughout the course of the day of what good or bad or okay is. What have I defined for the parameters of my day? I've totally not answered your question. You've stumped me.
Jeff, it's so great. And by the way, lucky that I asked the question, because if you would turn that question around and ask me, I have no idea what my answer would be. So your answer was so perfect. And I'm curious if we could bring somebody on the line right now, what would they say like a definition of enough is? That's what this show is all about. Imperfect, better after broken. You can only recognize that you're imperfect, or you can only look at a situation as broken and an opportunity to become better if you have some sort of internal reference. So that's why this show is imperfect. What's enough? What's good enough? I'd like to challenge our listeners to join us on this campaign. I would love it if we had a few more subscribers who would join the party with us. We love that you come to listen and comment and even send in questions. So like and subscribe. We're on all the social spaces that you can find us. And think about the question for a second. So what is the bar? And maybe we don't need to lower the bar to what is okay in order to be okay enough. Maybe we simply need to control the comparison, because that's where it all comes from. Buddha says the root of all suffering lies in comparison. So what if you could install a little button in your mind whenever something's happening and you feel yourself hearing those less than messages or not enough messages? What if you could say, okay, how is my control the comparison dial working right now? Am I looking at that paperclip and do I really need it, want it, and does it mean something about the value of my life? Or am I simply a little uncomfortable because there seems to be something going on that I'm not fully privy to?
You used, when you were talking about that a second ago, you talked about internal comparison or internal evaluation. And I think that that's such a great nugget there, because everything in our world right now drives us to external comparison. You look at social media. I saw something the other day that talked about girls between the ages of 13 and 17 who spend more than an hour on social media a day are 40% more likely to be depressed. That's almost every kid.
I don't know a person out there that spends an hour or less on a screen today.
What's your measure of comparison? And if we tie that to the perceived relative deprivation, my comparison is no longer internal, it is now external. Hey, I was having a really good day. I enjoyed that I played this local golf course, but I see that my friend from high school just got to play Pebble Beach. Now my afternoon with my friends somehow seems less exciting because their afternoon with their friend may have been more special.
Completely curated social media presence where people don't wake up and say, oh, let me put that half effort out on social media. When you really do well is when we tend to want to share the world. So people get this skewed view of what is enough, and it's all about social referencing. Social referencing isn't inherently bad. If we were all standing on a beach, wading in the water, and somebody said shark and ran out of the water, you want that social referencing for the threat of danger. Even though that shark might be heading towards your buddy 50 yards up the road, you don't want to take any chances. When there are cues in the social environment on how to survive, we definitely want to listen to those, but we can take it too far. The Hawthorne effect. The essence of this study is taking a look at people performing a job in the workplace, testing how well they did. So they had reviewers behind a glass screen, but it was viewable. So you're at the machine, making your widgets, working and looking up, and you could see that people were watching you. When they were watched directly, they produced X number more of widgets and with better quality. And when they weren't being watched, quality went down. That wasn't the purpose of the study. It was surreptitious discovery that the act of being watched by social, a social environment makes people up their game, up their output, up their bar for perceived need to shine. Hawthorne effect.
I love that you referenced the shark thing. Our first week here in Florida, we had moved from Rhode Island and we were walking down a beach, and there was a bunch of people in the water at the beach. And I saw my first shark in
The
Florida.
first week of living there?
Yeah. And I remember I had this strong desire for, maybe it's like watching too many Jaws movies. I wanted to be like, shark! And people are just casually in the water, like, oh yeah, look at that. I'm like, where did we move? Like, my first week here, I thought my bar of measuring success in Florida was not getting eaten by all the wildlife. My friend Kevin
Wow.
had me thinking that there would be rattlesnakes and water moccasins everywhere, that I was going to walk out in the backyard and just be bitten by a venomous snake. And now I'm at the beach, 3 hours at the beach, and then here's some sharks. Florida's like the Australia of America. It'll kill you. That speaks to the Hawthorne effect of, what's our measurement? What are we judging? And how are we defining success? And I wonder how many people out there have a no kidding measurement of what victory looks like for their day.
Wow. What does victory look like for my day? I want to try that challenge right now. We got up this morning and we're here this evening at this event. Did I have a conscious bar of what great looks like? I knew I got to have my time with you to do our show. I was excited about that. I knew I had to get a couple of things done for work. And then I have a surprise I'm making for my mom for Mother's Day. So, oops, sorry, Mom, close your ears. So I knew I wanted to work on that. But did I have a bar of what enough of joining with you, accomplishing work tasks, or working on my mom's thing? No, I didn't. So this benchmarking effect is a great point. In organizations, now we're moving into the workplace. When every team is benchmarked against the top 5%, by definition, everyone else is going to feel like they're failing, even when they're performing well. And that's how we create a culture of chronic insufficiency. How many times have you gotten a 3 out of 5? And we're moving away from numbers, thankfully, on performance evaluations. But how many times you've gotten a 3 and thought, why am I average? And then you start to look over at Joe and Jane across the street and wonder, what have they got that I don't have?
I've never really been good at it, and I struggled with that. There were times where I had jobs that were productivity based, and it was easy to assess progress. I needed to do 10 things and I got 11 done. I exceeded expectations. I needed to do 10 things. I only got 8 done, and I walked away feeling substandard. Like most people, I was defined by the number of checks on my to-do list, right? That I filled my little circle in. It didn't really feel right. That right there is the challenge for us, is to be able to balance objective measures with subjective feelings. And I started to really spend a lot of time on this. Like, what are the things I need to do as a tip of the cap to the book, Tribal Leadership, thinking about outcomes versus goals. I had goals on a daily basis, right? My to-do list. But then I started to really focus on what are the outcomes I need to influence, so that whether I won the day or not was more in my control. Did I get to talk to my people, right? So I had a goal to have 5 random conversations with my sailors or the associates I worked with, to check in on so many different pieces of equipment or spaces. When I was the chief engineer, I made sure that I was responsible for 235 spaces on the ship. No way I could visit all of them every day, but I made sure I hit a couple of them every day, and the more important ones I hit every day. So I kind of had a little checklist. So if I did those things, I felt like I positively influenced my day because I was focused on the outcome, creating a system that would influence long-term success. And so as I did that, I felt more productive and more in control, versus the days where I didn't have some sort of guide rails and I felt like it was haphazard and I was at the subjectivity of how I was feeling. Those days were very less satisfying, because it was being driven by what was my last interaction of the day. I didn't have anything objective to measure on. So if my last interaction of the day was positive, I went home with a smile on my face. If I had a hard conversation right before I left work, then I went home kind of like defeated and deflated.
As a willow in the wind meter of your worth as a person, rather than being grounded. I think what you just talked about might be the favorite concept of all the episodes that we've talked about so far. And I want to highlight an element of what you just said. So here's why this one matters to me most, Jeff. I want us to imagine your point about tribal leadership and focusing on goals versus focusing on outcomes. A goal has to do with what we do. Goals have inputs related to them. I'm going to have 5 calls. I'm going to run 2 miles. I'm going to finish 3 emails. So these goals or objectives are productivity and doing based. If, as in tribal leadership says, we focus on outcomes, not what do I want to do, but what do I want to cause, it can change everything. Here's a story for a made-up story for everybody to think about to illustrate this. You're having a birthday party for your 5-year-old son. What is your goal for the birthday party? Well, I got to get the balloon arch. I got to make sure the bouncy house is set up in the right area of the yard and that it repumps every so often. Got to make sure the cake is perfect. I've got this list of all these things I have to do. How stressed out am I feeling about all the activities that I have to get done? What is the outcome I want to cause? I want my son to be around people who love him and enjoy his spirit. And I want him to feel special. And I want him to create a core memory that when it's my birthday, we celebrate and have fun. Which one of these is more vulnerable to the caterer showing up on time, the balloons blowing up just perfectly, the dragon master showing up in the right costume? Most of the time, the outcome we seek, we sometimes will override because we get so tied to the goals that we set. And it really is usually not a direct correlation between how many perfect balloons were tied and how a person feels. In fact, when the irritability or the frustration or the sense of inadequacy builds up because these things didn't go right, we miss the very thing that we're trying to create and cause. So my question to our listener is to take Jeff's advice. How would you wake up tomorrow and instead of just focusing on goals, 3 emails, 2 miles, etc., what if you could focus on what you want to cause, a feeling, an impact, a milestone of courage?
It goes back to something I learned from you that, when you're crafting an experience for somebody, what do you want them to know, feel, or do differently as a result of that, right? So if we think about it that way, right, it changes the lens through which we look at it. I think another lens we could look at it through is, what's our time horizon? Are we playing an infinite game like Simon Sinek talks about? Or are we playing a very finite game where I'm only concerned about these 60 minutes? And it reminds me of, do you know who Greg Maddux is?
Absolutely.
Right? So maybe one of the greatest pitchers of all time. And he tells this story of how they were playing the Astros towards the end of the season, and he was facing Jeff Bagwell, and he purposely gave up a home run to Jeff Bagwell. He threw this meatball of a pitch that Bagwell just crushed, and the catcher's like, what happened, right? Like, you've been pitching a great game. And he goes, we're going to see them in the playoffs. And now he's going to be looking for that pitch. And so he, in the context of a finite game, 7th inning, I don't remember exactly which inning, but in the context of that finite game, he lost, so to speak. He gave something up to win something long term, right? So maybe letting go of control of the balloons so that you can be where your feet are, to use your expression. I can be in this moment. I can enjoy this thing. I have to let go of something, or I have to have an appreciation of the greater picture. I want my son to feel loved in this moment. So maybe I'm going to worry a little. Like, those things are important to me, but those are enabling objectives of the overall outcome and the experience you're trying to create. So that juxtaposition between the two.
Goosebump kind of a story. That was a throwaway game, if I remember. It was a blowout, like 10, some crazy. It was not going to affect the outcome of the game. So taking the strategic view of the long game and to create, talk about psychological ninja, have your outcome at the forefront rather than specific goals that blind us from the bigger picture. How many times in our lives have we been on a hamster wheel of some kind where we're trying and trying and trying, and suddenly we say, what am I doing this for? Why? And that centrifugal force that happens when we start a series of tasks and we just get obsessed and I have to finish and it's got to be right. I have to tell a story. My brother's going to kill me for telling this story, but I love him so much. And this is such an act of love. My granny died, and we all descend on the home in Chicago to close it up and get it ready for sale. And there is this crystal doorknob that for many years we kids all remember opening and closing that door, running in and out of the house all summer long as we would play at Granny and Grandpa's house. And my brother wanted to take that crystal doorknob and replace it with a regular doorknob for the next owners to have, because that crystal doorknob held so much meaning. And he was probably working on dislodging that doorknob. He's an extremely handy and mechanical guy. The fact that he could not get this door undone was not due to skill. It was a messed up door of 80 plus years that it had been there. And he got so frustrated with it that he went and he got a mallet. He got a rubber mallet to break loose the crystal knob, and you can guess how the story progresses from there. The goal was to honor Granny and to remember and to have this wonderful family emblem to bring home. That was the outcome he was seeking, but the goal was to get this dang thing off of the door, and so that became the family treasure in all of its cracked glory. Even at my brother's wedding, my aunt brought it at the rehearsal dinner to say, "This is what Dave will do for love." What a great family we have. Come out of the moment and think about the outcomes. My favorite part of this story, though, is the end, and this is why Dave will be okay with me telling this story, because he knows that I do it every chance I get, is that he was able to use that story to now tell his story about how awesome his granny and grandpa were and how connected we were. It's not about that physical thing. It's about the memories and the love and the joy that a home base and a steady place to visit in the summer brings. So what about those outcomes? Let the goals down for just a second to make sure you have your eyes on the prize.
Yeah, that's such a great story. And thank you for sharing it. We all have similar moments. My Christmas tradition of we do the annual pouring of the bourbon.
Yes.
Right. So in my house, Santa didn't get milk and cookies. Santa got whiskey because, as my dad would say, it's cold out there and he's getting milk and cookies everywhere. He needs something to warm up. So every year that pour is that's my favorite Christmas tradition. And every year my wife and kids do everything they can to help me recreate that memory. But they are also absolute pains in my rear end as we're trying to take the picture. Right. And it's almost like they edge me on while we're doing it. So the goal is to get the picture. I'm like it's like this very Homer Simpson moment for me where I'm like, go. Right. And every year, though, when I look back on the pictures from the year before, that frustration, the memory of the frustration makes that picture so much more important. The outcome of that moment makes the picture so much more valuable and memorable. It would be almost at this point disappointing and deflating if we got a smooth, poor picture and they weren't they weren't annoying and there weren't. So it's almost like this opportunity to really, I said it before, yes and instead of yes but. This idea that instead of having, to your point, a deficit mindset, to remember there is goodness that comes from that brokenness. Like, yes, they annoyed me as I was trying to get this. Why can't you guys just ever cooperate? This is the one thing that's important. And then now when I look back on the picture, and my favorite pictures aren't necessarily the smooth one where everything's right. It's the one where my wife and kids are behind me heckling me. I'm like, okay, that's actually my heart. That's actually the thing that's good.
your joy that you emanate when you share that story, and just when you realize that the magic was in the imperfect mayhem of it all, not in the picture perfect, all the balloon arches are great at the birthday party, or everything's poured just right. How did you realize that that was the good part, the broken, crazy chaos?
By listening to episode 1 of our podcast.
Hey,
I spend a lot of time looking back through memories. Part of my daily routine is like looking at my Facebook memories to see where we were years ago, right? And what we were posting about and things. And it just hit me one day, that idea of looking back at a picture. And then you look at the picture and you're like, oh, that was the thing. And then you think about the context around that picture, and it just kind of reminds you of the layers, right? The picture captures that moment in time, but thinking about the other things that were happening. And it was in that process of remembering, like, oh yeah, I remember I was like really annoyed, but that picture doesn't capture that. But then thinking about that moment and just the warmth that it brings you.
Oh man. Hunter S. Thompson, famous quote: "I do not want to arrive in a hearse in a well-preserved body, but rather skid in broadside, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, 'What a ride.'" So, we all imagine that everything's going to end perfectly, and that the stories people are going to tell at our funeral are going to be about how amazing and noble and selfless. No, the stories that people tend to tell about us, if they truly love us and they truly felt seen and experienced life with us, are usually the crazy quirks and things that didn't go exactly as planned. So I really appreciate that story. And now when I think about your perfect holiday picture, it is in those broken parts, or as Carly Simon would say, these are the good old days.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. What are we trying to create? And recognizing the difference between the outcome and the enabling goals that get us to the outcome. And I'm going to tell one more vignette before we get to this week's question, and because I think it'll set it up really well. I was talking with a client this week. We did this procedure and we got the outcome we wanted, but it could have been so much better. And I'm like, stop for a second. You saved that person's life, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yes. And then in the pause, he smiled. And I'm like, exactly. Could you have done it better? Sure. Are there things you can learn from that? Sure. But the joy you're experiencing right now of having had a positive influence on that person's story and saved their life. Why is that getting lost behind the fact that we were 3 minutes late for the surgery? That is, of course, important. But where is that level of importance relative to the outcome you were trying to create?
Your client was able to have that wry smile on his own as he was realizing where you were going, with inviting him to benchmark greatness or enoughness against a different set of standards than absolute perfection, which is neither attainable nor, in many cases, desirable, because it's not sustainable.
Yeah. And I am a huge proponent of Carol Dweck's idea of a growth mindset. But I think that when overdone, that causes us to miss the goodness of the moment. If I am only focused on but I could have done this, I could have done that, I should have done this, and instead of the fact of, I executed the overall thing. There's always going to be room for improvement. So celebrate the thing while learning from it, but don't discount the fact that you had your moment, right? Like that, it's okay to be okay. It's okay to say, yep, we did it. It was good. Could we have been on time? Yes. Could we have done a little bit better? Sure. Could I have been a little bit more detailed? Of course.
Carol Dweck gave us, in thinking about and really getting us all thinking about growth mindset, she gave us permission not to be more broken or to make more mistakes, have more failures, because those are going to happen whether we try or not. But she gave us permission to reframe what those failures mean and more quickly move on to the growth part. So the same evaluation of self, two different ways. I had a hit, my on-base percentage, I had a hit and a walk and a hit by pitch. So I was on base 3 times. But I didn't hit the 2 doubles that I was hoping to get. So I'm going to focus on that deficit. But my on-base percentage went up, first of all. And secondly, I helped score the game-winning run. So that negativity of being mad at myself because I really had set a goal like Babe Ruth. I pointed my bat out to the stadium and I was going to hit a grand slam. If I focus on the deficit, I miss the great stats, A, and B, I miss the celebrations in the dugouts with everybody else because nobody wants to come around and hug you and lift you up when you're beating yourself up. People tend to give you room when you're busy beating yourself up. Same facts going over here. You know what? I thought about hitting 2 doubles and I love that I aimed high for the stars. And I didn't get all the way there, but here I was at the moon and I helped my team score, which means I'm more likely to get more at-bats so that I can reach my dream someday. Both of them are acknowledging the deficit, the broken, the failure, but one of them is using it as fuel and inspiration, and the other is using it as a second arrow to deplete the resources that have already been tapped by not reaching the goal. Which choice do you want to make? Deficit or growth mindset, Carol Dweck?
Great lead into our question this week that comes from a listener in Arlington, Virginia. And their question goes, nothing is ever good enough at the company I work at. When we miss targets, we're justifiably critical. However, when we meet our targets, there's this cloud of negativity that remains. There's this sense of good job, but yes, we did this, but you should have done more. It's slowly crushing me and those around me. How can I positively influence this and maybe turn this around?
Okay, Arlington, thank you for that so common example. So we, instead of celebrating or being good enough or happy with the effort we put in and that we've moved closer, really focusing on that cloud of negativity, and it's contagious. So a question for our listener in Arlington is, where is that coming from? Can you pinpoint the sources of where that negative cloud is coming from? And is there any corner of your own space that you have control over where you could protect with a psychological umbrella from that getting in? When you read that question, Jeff, what came to your mind?
First, it resonated deeply. And it resonated deeply for me because when I was leading teams that I was hoping would be high-performing teams, we were very critical. We would do these debriefs that one of my mentors taught me about, and we called them the Blue Angels debrief. And it was modeled after how the Blue Angels debrief after one of their flying evolutions, where they are very critical of everything that happens. And getting the job done appropriately is the expectation. So they don't focus on that. They focus on the deviations. And when you're flying 400 miles an hour, 1.5 feet from one another, that makes a difference. Most of us aren't doing that, though. And this young sailor looked at me after we did a really good evolution, and I was very critical of the evolution because I was thinking, like, I'm going to model my mentor, and this is what I'm going to do, and we're going to be like the Blue Angels. And he's like, you ever going to tell us we did a good job? And I felt very convicted in that moment that I was very much instilling the but mentality, right? And I do believe your job is to get it right as a professional, but maybe there's a better way to focus on building the getting it right. And the way we talk to ourselves, the way we talk to one another matters. And so what I would tell our listener in Arlington is, instead of a yes, but mentality, create a yes and mentality. We hit our targets and there's still opportunity for us to do a little bit more. No, we didn't hit our targets. And here's where we missed out. And here's what we did really well. Because I think that there are times you can win and have played really poorly. So how excited about that victory should you be? And there's times where you lose and you played perfectly. So how upset about that loss should you be? So I think the context matters, and the highlighting the positive is almost as important, if not more important, than highlighting the negative, and having a good balance of the both really, really matters.
Wise words. I hope our listener can imagine a scenario where you might apply that thinking of recognizing that my body, mind, and spirit are listening to every single thing I say and think. Words matter at a cellular level. There is research on psychoneuroimmunology. Here's a cocktail term for you that shows that cognitive negativity, chronic negative thinking, has real effects. It leads to clinically significant higher inflammation of the body. HSCRP, you might get measured, clinically significant. Your stress hormones, which suppress immune function, real consequences of negative thinking. And there's a concept called the placebo effect, which we all know about, that if I believe something will help, it leads to real improvement. What a lot of people don't know about is the nocebo effect. The nocebo effect is equally predictive or kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, but the nocebo effect is the belief that something will harm creates real negative effects. So as Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Think about how much power you have in that concept of you can control the amount of cortisol that your body releases. You can control the outcome of a situation simply by changing what you decide to think. There's even a tip, a tool. It's a strange one. I dare you to try it right now. You're feeling depressed, you're feeling down, you're feeling upset. Try a half smile. What's a half smile? It is either half side of your face, but typically it's just a little bit of upturn of your lips to create that. Your body does not distinguish between actual smiling because you're happy and being signaled that something good is happening. So if that's true, if the smiling effect can uplift me, so too can the frowning effect. We have much more control over our body, our mind, and our spirit than we might believe. Our body responds to what we bring in at a cellular level. So let's choose wisely.
What were you trying to shape? What was the outcome you were trying to create? To my client earlier in the week, saving the patient's life? Or was it saving the patient's life while being perfectly on time, doing everything perfectly right, everything boom, 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 being perfect? If it was saving the patient's life, you were successful.
Mm-hmm. So we have control not only over the thoughts that we reinforce, but the bar that we set and the measurement by which we select what okay is. There's a Bible verse, Galatians 6:4. May I read it to you?
Please.
Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else. What if you became the benchmark?
We have a very, I almost feel guilty saying this after that lovely Bible verse. In our house, the question I ask my kids when they are telling me they had a bad day is, did you poop your pants? If the answer is no, then your day wasn't as bad as it could have been.
Jeff, that's perfectly timed. And that is why this is imperfect, better after broken. I am Susan Hendrich.
And I'm Jeff Servello.
And this has been a delightful conversation. And in fact, Jeff, was it okay, this conversation?
I think it was more than okay. And I think that we set up that we wanted to give people a little bit of humor and some learning, and hopefully you got that from this episode. We would ask to please share an episode with your friends, help us get the word out, and we love you and appreciate you listening.
Awesome. Jeff, thank you. I will see you next week and look forward to our topics where we celebrate the cracks, the scars, and the stories that make us stronger.
Absolutely.
Right here on Sandcastle Radio, America's hottest online variety and music station. See you next week at 6 p.m. Eastern Time.
By episode 15, for everybody listening, we will have that handoff smooth, or maybe we won't. We like to keep you on your toes.
That's right. It's like butt up.
Did you poop your pants?